Alright, welcome to the first Python 3 lesson. Today we're going to be talking about lists. So first I'm going to give a brief introduction about lists in Python and an overview of some things that you can do with them. Finally, I'll run through a short example. So far in your course you've seen three kinds of data structures. You've seen strings for holding text, integers for integer numbers, and floats for numbers with decimal points. Now in contrast, a list is a data type that can hold a sequence of other data types. So it can hold strings, integers, floats, or even other lists. Right, so lists are created by surrounding the data with square brackets and separating the elements by commas. I just want to move to a slightly more practical example that we can use throughout the video. Right, so our shopping list example here contains 4 strings. Now we can refer to each of the elements in the list using an index. Indexing starts from 0, so bread is at index 0, butter is at index 1, milk at index 2, and apples at index 3. Now because we don't always know the size of the list that we're dealing with, Python also allows negative indexing. This means that the last element in the list can be referred to by index -1, the second last by -2, and so on. Right, so if we wanted to print out the element at index 1, we just write the name of our list, which is shopping, and then in square brackets just write a 1. Okay, let's just try this out in the console. So I have our shopping list made here already, and if I want to print out the whole list, I can just say print shopping. If I want to print out an individual element, I put in square brackets after shopping and the index of the element in square brackets. So the element at index 1 should be butter. So if I print at index 1, we get butter, and if I want to print the second last element, that would be -2. So the second last element is milk. Now the reason we need lists is because we don't always know the size of the data that we're dealing with. With the shopping list we can add or remove elements as needed, but if we tried to do this with strings, we'd have to say like S1 equals bread, S2 equals butter, and so on, and our program would only work for a fixed number of items. So lists are useful when we don't know in advance the size of the data that we're working with. Right, the next thing we're going to look at is how to loop through the elements in a list. We can do this using the for keyword, which you've probably seen already in your course. The syntax here is for item in shopping. Now I could have called item here anything we like, but I just called it item because it's just relevant in this case. So everything that you want to happen for each item in the shopping list needs to be indented here. So all the code needs to go in there. So let's just say that we want to print out each item in the shopping list. Now the first time this for loop runs, item will be bread, and the next time it will be butter, and then milk, and then apples. So each time, the first time it will print bread, the next time it will print butter, next time milk, and next time apples. So just so you can see that working on the console, we'll have for item in shopping, and for each item we're just going to print it out, and that's the output of the for loop there. Now before we look at examples, I just want to go through some list functions. Right, so first I'll show you how to add elements to a list. Now lists have 2 functions for adding elements to it, called append and insert. What append does is it adds to the end of the list. This function is built into lists, so we have to say shopping.append and then in the brackets whatever element we want to append. So in this case we want to append the element cheese to our shopping list, and it adds it at the end. If we want to insert an element at a specific index, we can use the insert method instead. Now insert takes 2 arguments. The first is which position in the list you want to insert it in. In this case we're inserting it at position 1, and the second argument is the element that you want to insert. So first we tell it where in the list we want to put it, and then we tell it what we want to insert into the list. Now for removing elements, we can use the remove method to remove by value. So we can say shopping.remove milk, and what that will do is it will go through the shopping list one by one, and the first value that it finds with the first element that it finds with the value milk, it will remove that from the list. Now pop on the other hand removes by index. So if we say shopping.pop of 2, that removes the index at element 2, so that removes milk. The last two methods I'm going to show you are the index and length methods. Now, index finds the index of an element in the list. So if you say shopping.index of milk, that will give you back 2. So that's the position of milk in the shopping list. And finally, len. Now, len returns the number of items in the list, which in this case is 4. You have to be careful with this one because len is a built-in Python function. It's not specific to lists. It also works with strings and other data structures, so instead of saying shopping.len, we have to say len of shopping. Finally, we're going to look briefly at two-dimensional lists. I mentioned earlier that lists can hold any kind of data structure. Well, they can also hold other lists. So two-dimensional lists are just lists that can contain other lists. So if we wanted to create a 2D list, we just first create our main list. I'll call this numbers and just put in the square brackets for it. And so this 2D list will have 3 other lists inside of it. The first list has the numbers 1, 2, 3. The second list has 4, 5, 6, and the third has 7, 8, 9. So as usual, it's just a list with square brackets and each element separated by a comma. It's just that the elements inside this are also lists. Alright, so these lists can be referred to by the indexes 0, 1, and 2. So numbers 0 gives us the list 1, 2, 3. Numbers 1 gives us the list 4, 5, 6. And numbers 2 gives us the list 7, 8, 9. Right, so if we wanted to refer to a specific element inside one of these lists, we'd have to say numbers square bracket 0, which gives us this list, and then another square bracket after that with a 1, say, and that'll give us the element at position 1 in this list, which is 2. And similarly in this list we can say numbers square brackets 1 and then square brackets 2, which is element at position 2 in the numbers 1 list. And similarly again, numbers 2, 0 will give us the element at position 0 in numbers 2, which is 7. Right, so just to demonstrate that quickly on the console, just create a list here with the numbers 1, 2, and 3. And we'll create our 2D list, which will just be empty for now. And we're just going to add whatever's in list A to numbers. So if we print out numbers, you'll see that it contains one list with the numbers 1, 2, 3. And I'll do the same thing again for 4, 5, 6. And numbers.append A. And the same thing again for 7, 8, 9. Okay, and if we print out numbers one last time, you'll see that numbers now has 3 lists inside of it. So if we wanted to refer to a specific element here, let's say we wanted to refer to the 6, that's in the list at index 1. So the list at index 1 is 4, 5, 6, and the list at index 1, position 2, will be numbers square brackets 1 and then square brackets 2, and that'll give us the 6. Alright, so just to wrap it up, I'm just going to run through a short example using two-dimensional lists. So the question says, using a two-dimensional list, write a program that lets a user add 3 items to a shopping list and their corresponding price. Then print out the two-dimensional list in the following format: item whatever costs price, and then item whatever costs price. Okay, since we're using a two-dimensional list, I guess the first thing to do is to create an empty list that will store all our product names and prices in. Okay, so if we want to create an empty list, just leave the brackets empty here. And we want to ask them for 3 items. So the easiest way to do something 3 times is to say for something in range of 3. You can do this with a while loop as well if you prefer, but I find this way to be a lot easier and less error prone. So everything that we want to go do 3 times is going to be indented in here. So what we want to ask them first is to enter a product name, and we'll store that in a variable called item, and similarly just ask them to enter a price for the product, so enter a price. Now we want to put these 2 items, item and price, into a list and then add it to items. So if we want to put these into a list, we just create a temporary list with the variables item and price in it. So item and price are the two elements in the list, and then we can add that to our items list by saying items.append a. Now just to see that that's going okay so far, I'm just going to print out the value of items at this point and see how we're doing. Okay, please enter a product name, bread, enter a price 150, enter a product name. Okay, now you see that our list here is a two-dimensional list, and we've added all the items to it. I'm just going to copy this into the program so that you can keep track of what's going on here. And I'll just make it a comment and make it a bit more readable for humans. Right, so now items is a two-dimensional list that looks like this. It's got 3 lists inside it, and each list has 2 elements, which is an item name and a price. So we want to loop through each of these one by one. Just to go back up to the question, we want to print out the 2D list in the following format: item and then the item name, and then the word costs, and then the price. So we want to go through each one of these one by one and print them out in that format. Okay, so if we want to go through a list element by element, we can say for item in items. Again, this word item here, we could call it anything we like, it's just relevant to call it item. In fact, just because we have an item variable up here, I'll just call it my item or something like that, just to avoid confusion with that. Right, so the first time this for loop runs, my item will be this list. The next time it runs, it will be this list, and the last time it runs, it will be this list. So what we want to print out is the word item, and that's text, so it's got to go in quotes, and then the product name, which is going to be my item 0. So my item is this list, and my item 0 is the product name, my item 1 is the product price, then the word costs, and then my item 1. Okay, so let's just run that and see that it works. So one more time, enter, whoops, I'll run that again, and I'll just get rid of this thing we printed out earlier. So if I run this again and say bread 150, just to say the same as last time. Okay, so you see that it loops through the list and prints out each item and its corresponding price one by one. Okay, that's the end of the tutorial. Thanks for watching.